Hello, this is Jacqueline Eckern with Eating Disorder Hope, and today I have the privilege of interviewing Andrew Walen. He is the founder and CEO of the Body Image Therapy Center. He is a psychotherapist and he specializes in eating disorders, body image, anxiety and depression, self-harm, and self-esteem. He's an active author, speaker, and also an advocate on these issues. And with that, I'd just like to say hello to you, Andrew.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you.
So I was really excited to get your input on males and body image and eating disorders, and I'd like to just dive in.
Let's do it.
All right. So my first question for you is, how do males with eating disorders present differently than females?
So males are often thought of as being a significant minority of the eating disorder population because historically men are not seeking treatment. About 1 in 10 were seeking care. And so there's this thought that males don't really suffer as much as females, and that's because they're only looking at the way females present. So nobody was really catching this. Males with anorexia, for instance, while certainly make up about 1/4 of those who actually suffer from anorexia, the fact is males are going to present with a slightly higher BMI, even though the behaviors are the same. They're going to use a different language to describe what they're struggling with. Instead of being focused on weight and fearful of weight gain, they're going to be thinking about, I'm worried about my muscularity. I'm worried about my masculinity. With bulimia, they're often not really purging with laxatives or diuretics. The purge is often through exercise or the follow-up restriction after, say, a cheat day, which is often what they're thinking of as the binge aspect of bulimia. They call it cheat days, so very much planned. And then the binge experience is very similar, but males are often don't display the sense of concern about binges that females will display, because to suffer in some way is less masculine. So they're not likely to endorse the post-binge anxiety or self-loathing. Though I think the more you get into it and they start to trust and the barriers come down, they will endorse, well, actually, yeah, I was afraid of being bullied. I was afraid of being fat shamed. I was afraid of, taking my shirt off in public. So there are thoughts once they start to dig in. And on top of it, the display of what we call muscle dysmorphia is an extremely common form of a demonstration of an eating disorder. Now, what's the difference between, what is muscle dysmorphia? That's the fear of not being muscular or masculine enough. So they will look at themselves in the mirror and say they're not big enough, they're not cut enough. And so it usually comes with eating disordered behavior, such as significantly cutting out fats or carbs or calories, what have you, so that they can reduce their fat percentage. But they don't necessarily understand that cutting out of foods or meals or what have you, that what we might look at in some others and call it orthorexia, is actually a disordered eating behavior tied to muscle dysmorphia. So again, the display is so very different. Women talk about being worried about how they look from the waist down. Men worry about how they look from the waist up. Unlike women who almost 100% are worried about being thin, 50% of males want to be bigger, while 50% want to be smaller. So there's so many differences that we really have to think about in the male population.
Fascinating. I can just imagine that loved ones of individuals dealing with disordered eating and body dysmorphia will feel so relieved to hear you and get some clarification on how this differs.
I hope so.
We used to hear, Andrew, that males make up a very small percentage of those who struggle with disordered eating. What does the latest research say now about diagnosis rates?
Well, and that's exactly in hand with this, is that we always thought, just like in addictions research, it was always thought addictions were a male concern. And then it was back in the 50s and 60s and 70s, and they're realizing that's just who was actually in the rooms, and that this was actually addictions are something that hit males and females across the spectrum at the same rate. I suspect what we are really seeing is that the same is true with eating disorders. The reality is we heard that 10% of those with eating disorders were male. Not true. If we actually start to think about this and we look at the research more carefully and constructively, it's because we didn't have the right questions. We were asking things that were not sensitive to the way that males talk about eating disorders. So even with the less sensitive instruments that are not specific to males, we're finding 25 to 33% of males make up those who suffer from anorexia and bulimia. It's about gender equal when it comes to binge eating disorder, that males make up 2/3 of those who are diagnosed with ARFID, which is avoidant restrictive feeding and intake disorder. And that, again, if we include that muscle dysmorphia component, or and which again is not considered an eating disorder, it's part of the OCD spectrum, but it really is, because of the pathological disordered eating behaviors, should be qualified as an eating disorder. And then we include those who are getting more appropriately screened, who are using, who have cultural norms where masculinity isn't so starkly different than female understanding of, of emotions and language about emotions and softness and what have you. We take all of that into account, and we're probably seeing that the numbers are much closer to equal. But we have to be able to take down the barriers as soon as possible, and really increase the research funding so that males are getting more appropriately assessed.
Are there different questions you would ask or tools you would use when assessing a male for an eating disorder?
Absolutely. So let's take, for instance, one of the early screening tools was the EAT26. And that is still one of the most popular and widely used. That does not have nearly any sensitivity towards males. The questions are things like, are you greatly concerned about the shape of your buttocks? Now, I don't know very many guys who are going to really admit to that. Are you extremely concerned about your inner thigh gap? Again, guys are not answering this question. The questions are in languages that are extreme. Guys don't say, I'm extremely worried or I'm incredibly overwhelmed by. Guys say, I think about this. And if they say that, then guess what? They really think about it, right? So we have to be very clear that the language is different. And again, that what they're concerned about is not just getting thin. It's not about weight. It's about leanness and masculinity and muscularity, and that there certainly is some overlap between the language of female and male eating disorder behaviors. But there's really no well-verified tool that's in the public domain yet to really assess for males. The closest we have is the eating disorders assessment for males. And that is something that is still in academic research and is being validated for greater use and more wide use. But I think we cannot use the same language and the same tools that we currently are using. Again, it just has to be more effort to take a look at those questions and really think, is that what a guy would say? And most of the time the answer is probably not.
Yeah. So while gender is one issue, what about sexual identity as a factor for the males who develop body image concerns and eating disorders?
That's another great question that I think is this belief that males who do have eating disorders typically are consider themselves part of the LGBTQ continuum. And while those who identify LGBTQ have a higher rate of eating disorders, because there is a cultural phenomenon where the extreme for beauty and leanness and muscularity is really high for those who identify that way. 85% of those who are males, 85% of males who develop eating disorders are cisgender heterosexual males. And so again, if we're talking about 10 million to 20 million Americans who are males with eating disorders, that's a really high number who are general population males, who are not minority males, what have you. It's a stark reminder that this is not a female disease. This is not a gay male's disease. This is a human disease. If we take into issues of males who identify as bisexual, we see even more differences. If we take into those who are transgender, we see that the rate goes from, say, 3 times more likely to develop an eating disorder to 5 times more likely to develop an eating disorder than the general population. We start looking into even more cross-sectional issues of, are they Asian ancestry? Are they Hispanic ancestry? Are they African ancestry? And we just don't have a way to greatly identify this. But what's interesting is that Hispanic and Black males do seem to have slightly higher rates of binge and bulimia than white males in America. So again, the research is just getting started, but we don't know nearly enough, and we just are not getting the funding we need.
Yeah, it's very concerning on the research funding, and we do what we can at Eating Disorder Hope to bring attention to research measures across the globe, but we could certainly do more too. What would you say, Andrew, to someone whose loved one is male and struggling with disordered eating and body image issues?
Someone who is struggling, it's really the same thing that I would say to anyone. I would first learn everything you can about what is going on in the world of males and eating disorders. I would really get yourself educated about it so you can speak with some foundation of that. That's always step one. Don't assume that you know a whole heck of a lot by what you've read in media articles. Dig in a little bit to it. And with that information, lovingly talk to the person that you care about and share with them, I love you. Here's what I'm seeing factually. Here's what I'm seeing. And this is how I'm feeling about it. Really express the actual emotion. I'm scared. I'm worried about you. And offer them an opportunity to talk about it. If they're not ready, what's really clear is that person's not going to reach out for help. But if they have somebody that is showing empathy and a genuine interest in them, eventually the hope is they will reach out. Here's the issue though. Males are much more likely than females to avoid treatment. And when they do go to treatment, it's typically when they are significantly more ill, whether it's mentally ill or physically ill, which means they're going to higher levels of care. And they then are feeling like, I just need to fix the behavior and not do the mental health work. So we see males recover more quickly from their behaviors in the inpatient and residential treatment and step down before they're really mentally ready. And then they have a much higher rate of relapse. And partially this, I suspect, and there's no research to this, but this is my anecdotal understanding. When they get to higher levels of care treatment, they're the only guys there. And so they feel out of place and ostracized, in that the language is always female-centric and it doesn't relate to them. And so they do whatever they have to do to get out and get back to what is their comfort zone. So again, the more we can create spaces where males feel safe and accepted and normalized, the more likely that they're going to really stick around and do the work. We see that in the few spaces where we have high enough census around the country, where males have significant populations to have their own groups, or at least to be in groups where they're not the only one in the program. And that's really important. And hopefully we get more and more people into treatment so that they will buy in and stick around and do the work. But it all starts with normalizing the experience, feeling like somebody really gets me, empathizes with me, and that has to also start with education of the person who is talking to them. The language is not the same language that women use, so we can't use that language when we're talking to males who are struggling.
Andrew Walen, you are clearly an expert. How can we reach you, and can you tell us more about founding the Body Image Therapy Center, where you're located, what kinds of treatment you provide?
Sure. So I started the Body Image Therapy Center after I had several years of recovery from an eating disorder myself. I suffered for 20 years. And I was already a graduate student at the University of Tennessee School of Social Work in Nashville when I finally was speaking to my peers in the program who had treatment for their own eating disorder, who were also suffering from an eating disorder. I was like, holy crap, these are all the same things I've been saying all my life and doing all my life. And do I have an eating disorder? And sure enough, yeah, I did. And so I got treatment, but again, it was I couldn't join any programs because nobody treated males, and there were no safe rooms for me to participate in. So when I finally had an opportunity to start a private practice, I wanted it to be a place where I could get multi-specialty group going, where we had nutrition and we had psychiatry and therapy that had some sense of how to work with men as well as women. We treated everybody, and that grew from a private practice to group practice to multi-specialty group to a program that had an IOP and then 2 locations and then PHP. And so here we are now. This is my 13th year with the Body Image Therapy Center. And we are currently an IOP, PHP, and outpatient program with medical and psychiatry and nutrition and every service that you would need in Baltimore, in downtown Baltimore, in the heart of Washington, D.C., near the National Zoo. And we have an adolescent family-based program, IOP and outpatient, in Columbia, Maryland. And our hope is, certainly due to the pandemic right now, it's slowed us down considerably, but our hope is to also open up residential, which has we really intend to have a male track, a female track, and a substance abuse track. And, if everything comes together and we manage to get out of this well, this will be in Maryland as well. Hopefully end of 2020, if not, then hopefully early 2021.
Excellent. All right. So to learn more, the website they should visit is thebodyimagecenter.com.
That's right. It's www.thebodyimagecenter.com. And, our phone number for our intake line is 877-674-2843. And if anybody wants to reach me and ask me any questions directly, email is always the best way to reach me. It's andrew@thebodyimagecenter.com.
Excellent. Thank you so much for the information and education for all of us today, Andrew.
Oh, it was great fun. I'm glad to do it.